We're now on day 3 of our sessions. And before we go into the session, I'll just quickly do a little bit of housekeeping rules that we'd like to share. Please ensure, like I said, that your name is displayed. This is quite vital to us to record your attendance so that later on there is no issue with the certification. So a quick check through the room, and if you have so if you don't know how to do the renaming, you can just type in your name in the chat box and we will do the renaming for you from our side. Thank you so much. So today's session is on communications, and I hope you've had a chance to go over the resource toolkit and review the chapter in the ebook, as well as have a look at the webinar. Today we have the facilitators who are with us. The lead facilitator is Dr. Param Kharbanda, who is a professor of neurology and epileptology at PGI Chandigarh, and he has tremendous experience in training for communications in healthcare, and he coordinates this program for the Indian Academy of Neurology, the Epilepsy Society, as well as for PGI. And to assist him in the facilitation is Dr. Dinesh Kumar, who is a professor of community medicine at Pramukh Swami Medical College in Anand in Gujarat, and has worked extensively in palliative care and has been part of several training sessions, not just for the Pali-COVID ECHO sessions, but across the country in different palliative care settings. I will also be on hand to assist. My name is Smriti. I'm trained as a psychologist, and I'm the Director of Programs at Pallium India. So before we jump into today's session, we'll just do a quick recap of where we're at. Session 1, which was led by Dr. Moira and Dr. Jennifer, that was when we first encountered the family of Ramesh. And Ramesh is a gentleman who's elderly, who has several comorbidities, and he developed symptoms. We accompanied the family on their journey as they try to navigate the system. We try to understand what their different uncertainties and concerns may be, and also what the impact would be on the healthcare providers who were tasked with helping Ramesh and his family. What were some of the issues related to triage? What are some of the ethical decision-making processes involved in providing him the right kind of care, which was in line with the goals of care most suited and most appropriate to somebody like him. And yesterday in the session on symptom control that was led so beautifully by Dr. Shobha Nair and Dr. Rajeshri, we accompanied Ramesh as his symptoms, as his condition began to deteriorate. And we talked about the anxieties also associated with that. And also we came across a very poignant time when his son asked the treating team to make sure that he doesn't suffer. And so excellence in symptom control became the priority. And that's where we were with Ramesh's family yesterday. And we also learned a lot of different ways in which the palliative care approach can be used in order to address the constellation of symptoms associated with COVID-19. So today we will take a deep dive into communication issues, not just at this point in Ramesh's journey, but also in general, overall, how we as medical practitioners and clinicians, what are some of the challenges in communication that we experience on a regular basis, and how those challenges have now been actually magnified by the pandemic that we are experiencing together. And whether we are treating infected patients or affected families, which is pretty much everybody, how these communication skills are now a lifeline in the absence of being able to physically do some of the things that we were able to do earlier in terms of reassurance or in terms of communication. So I'm going to hand over now to Dr. Param to lead the session, and Dr. Dinesh and I will be on hand to also assist you with your queries on the chat box. Please feel free to use it freely and to express your, to ask questions or to share experiences that you may have, and whatever you think is relevant to the current session. So thank you very much. Dr. Param, over to you.
Yeah. Thank you, Smriti. My name is Param Kharbanda, as Smriti introduced. I apologize for the camera issue. Somehow my Video is not coming, but you can have a look at my picture. So, so till I share my slides, Dr. Dinesh will give a brief intro about today's subject. In the meantime, I'll get my slides ready. Dinesh.
Okay, good afternoon. Am I audible?
Yes, you are, Dinesh.
Okay, thank you. So today, as Smriti told, we'll be dealing with a very important topic that is related to communication. And it is relevant not only for the COVID setting, but as such also in all the settings where we care for our patients, whether it is in a intensive care setting or it is a community care setting, or maybe home care also. Communication forms very important part of the entire package of services that we can provide to our patients and their families. And more so in conditions where many times we might not actually have the curative options, very strong curative options. So there it becomes even more important. Okay? And also, if you look at the COVID setting where things are changing very rapidly and there are lots of uncertainties. So it will be one of the very important component of the care that we are providing. We also assume that you have some kind of understanding of basics of communication skills, because the topics that we are dealing are a bit towards the advanced communication. So however, in between wherever you feel you need some more clarifications, please do raise your queries in the chat box and feel free to interact with us. So Dr. Param, are you ready? I think.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, you can go ahead.
Thank you, Dinesh, and welcome back. So I'm going to present from the slide set, which has mainly been prepared by Pallium India teams and Valley COVID Kerala, with leading from Dr. Biju Raghavan, who also does these sessions for our team. And I'm going to just add a few, ice-breaking things in between, and then we'll go on to the main slide set. So as Dr. Dinesh said, we all understand that communication or good communication is important, not only for the healthcare workers or anybody or any profession, or even in personal relationships. Good communication actually helps and decrease a lot of heartburn and all. So what we plan to cover in this today's session is what are the challenges in communication generally, especially in the COVID times. How do we manage those challenges? Some do's and don'ts to have a streamless communication. And then the other couple of things we'll be dealing with will be grief, communicating serious illness or bad news, and managing stress. The data, as already Smriti said, is given in your ebook from page 10 to 11. And I'm sure you read it. If not, you can refer to it after the session. So before we go ahead, I would want to ask you just to enumerate, we all know that, but just to enumerate, what do you think are the benefits of good communication in healthcare practice? In today's practice, in general healthcare practice between doctors and patients, between nurses and patients, between nurses and their family members, patients' family members. So what all does it do? And please keep writing, and Dr. Dinesh will, and we will discuss, all of us will discuss together. Yeah.
There are some queries already.
Yeah.
You can avoid misunderstanding, complaints will increase, overall anxiety levels will go down. You can establish trust. You can establish a kind of connectivity with the patient. Brings clarity and a sense of openness. There's gain of confidence from both the sides. There's good rapport building.
Absolutely. I'm happy that people are, sensitized to this, and that is very good. I'm sure many of you are already practicing those, and we'll go over these points.
The important thing that is very satisfaction of patients will go high.
That's true. Very true. Yeah. So that is good interaction. Another thing which we keep discussing, and I also had a discussion with my mentors when I was going through the learning part of the communication. So do you think the communication or good communication is a learnable skill, or does it come naturally? So some people can do it, some people can't. Is it like that, or what is your view on that?
So far, everyone feels learnable, and now we have got response which feel both.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it's almost equally divided between learnable and both.
Okay. Yeah, good. I think both responses are absolutely right. So we felt, and I mean, maybe I'm one of those also who used to feel that it's all a natural skill, and who can talk well, can communicate well with the patients. But I totally agree. It is both. I mean, it's like a hardware and a software thing. So it's mainly a software which can be installed, but if there's a hardware which is good already, it helps. So a good personality or a good compassionate personality helps. But there are a lot of things which can actually be learned, like any other subject we learn. Good.
So Dr. Pam, there is another very interesting comment.
Yeah, yeah.
It can be learned, but we need to practice to enhance it. So learning with
Absolutely.
practice.
No, that's I'm just smiling because learning, and then over time we need to make it as part of our routine thing rather than practicing it as a learned procedure, because it doesn't work like that. Like a surgery is a surgery, you can learn it. You need to learn it, but it should not come across as a superficial or a learned thing only. So it's very absolutely good point made here that it needs to be practiced over and over so that it becomes your second nature. You've seen the last question there, which is that do you think there are some specific challenges in COVID times which hamper or make it difficult for us to communicate well with the patients and their families?
Presence of PPE, then mysterious nature
Yeah,
of COVID. There's lots of fear and anxiety around COVID.
absolutely.
There's some sense of panic. There's some stigma associated with the disease.
Mm-hmm.
The patients are a bit anxious. There might be some kind of agitation. There's
Yeah.
lots of confusion and fear everywhere.
Absolutely. I think they're all very excellent points, and this is exactly what we are facing, and probably you are facing, whoever is taking care of COVID, and mainly the barriers. So it's basically barriers to communication, whether it's a physical barrier or a PPE barrier, or it is a distance barrier, or it is only through technology we can communicate. So these are all barriers in communication in COVID time. So yeah, it is quite challenging. So we'll go on to the main slide set, and in between, if you read the ebook thing, if you want any specific point to be discussed more, we'll be very happy to do that. So I just made a small mnemonic, which I call the 4 C's of good communication. Namely, they are we need to be candid. Candid means totally honest, and what I mean by that is that we can twist the style to make it more palatable, what we want to say, and make the patient comfortable. But we do not twist the facts. So that is important. That sometimes in our, in our very good faith, the medical workers, especially doctors, tend to over, give the prognosis. No, it'll be fine. That person will be okay. And so this is something we need to avoid. We need to tell the facts, and we are obliged also to tell. But maybe we can make it a little more comfortable. Um, the next is clear. So by clear, we mean that it should be in a common language that the patient understands. Because we use so much of medical communication, it sometimes we end up using medical words. So it should be clearly said in a language the patient understands. If need, we also can have an interpreter present. Third is concise, as the patient is not used to listening to what we talk about daily. It has to be said in a concise manner, in small chunks, so that patient can understand. And it has to be complete. If we leave out few important things, then it can lead to issue. And that's the video I'm going to just show you next. This is from a group exercise which some motivational groups do for trust building. So in which a new person, which is in the green jacket, is asked to step on the chair by the instructor whose arms you can see. And the other people are asked to gather around, and the new person is asked to close the eyes and trust the other people that when he falls, they will catch him. So they count and he has to fall. So everything has been told, communicated, but like what you see now, the only thing that person missed out was that he didn't tell which side to fall. So everything went well, but he fell in the front, which was not desirable. So just on the lighter side. So coming back to how communication skills have, you already given some very good points in that better, decrease anxiety and more patient-doctor relationship, especially in today's times when there are a lot of medical legal cases also. A lot of them people have done study due to lack of communication. So all that helps. In addition, there have been scientific studies which show that these people may have better control of people who have been dealt with empathy and communicated well by their healthcare teams, have a better control of their blood pressure, their sugar, their pain, and they undergo less unnecessary tests and treatment plan. They are involved more in their treatment plan. So there is a higher chance, as somebody already said, to sticking to the treatment plan. And and having better patient outcome also. So these are all scientifically proven studies. So coming back to Ramesh, who you are familiar with for the last 2 days, and unfortunately he has a lot of comorbidities and very aggressive treatment has been not considered along with the family. But still there is a lot of anxiety, and maybe the son wants to know what is the outcome, will his father live, and they have heard so much about COVID, they have so many queries, will somebody else get it? So all these things which need to be told need good communication, because we may just keep saying repeatedly certain things, but unless we know what their worries are, we may not be able to help them properly. So what are the challenges? Challenges of communication. So there are challenges faced by patients, which are fear. As I said, that patients are very afraid. We never realize sometimes that we go to the hospitals every day morning. It becomes like a second home for us. But those patients don't visit. And I personally know a few people in my family too, who don't like going into the hospital. It gives them a very foreboding kind of a feeling. So this is very important that we understand that perspective from the patient, that they may be extremely anxious. They may say it or not say it, but they may be fearful, they may be anxious, they may be frustrated that things are not happening according to the plan or too much time is being taken. And as I said, we keep using medical jargon, patient is having cytokine storm or ARDS and all those things, and they may not understand. We may keep talking over them. All this makes it difficult for the patient to actually understand things which we are even saying. So it's part of our job to make the patients comfortable. Otherwise, the sadness can cause cognitive clouding. There's a clip I showed from a movie couple of weeks back. I saw this Sushant Singh's movie called Dil Bechara. So in this exactly same thing is being said by the patient here in the hospital, and see how it is similar to what we are discussing here.
लेकिन इस हालत में उस वजह से मिलने से मैं डर रही थी। I guess हम सब डरे हुए थे। माँ बाबा को डॉक्टर्स के मेडिकल शब्दों से डर लग रहा था। जितना अच्छा डॉक्टर उतने ही कॉम्प्लिकेटेड वर्ड्स। बाबा सिर्फ सर हिला रहे हैं, पर उन्हें कुछ समझ नहीं आ रहा।
So see how similar it is to what we're discussing. And this is not from a healthcare worker. This is from a script writer of a movie or a novel on which it is based. And those people have somehow experienced that how intimidated and confused they or their family can be in front of, senior doctors and all. In addition to that, there are challenges faced by family also, especially in COVID. There is fear is there, but there is stigma that, those people around their locality or something may start avoiding them, or there have been incidents where they've been asked to leave the facility because other people are fear as if the COVID will come through the walls, which is not true, because this cannot travel across the wall. So all these things they are fighting, in addition to the fear of possibly losing some family member. And then we have our own challenges, as we said, because we don't have time to build rapport with the patient, because COVID comes acutely. It's not a chronic illness where we have the luxury of meeting patient twice or thrice and build a rapport. We can't do that. And family is not with the patient during critical time. That also is a big issue for us, how to communicate, call them up or make them, how to make them more comfortable. In fact, I wanted to show, I have not put it, there is a notice from the government of India recently, I shared with a group that they have asked that as far as possible, try to, if the patient is conscious or otherwise, try to let them have their communication devices like mobile phone or a small tablet from which they can video conference or talk to their family. Of course, sanitization has to be done properly, but this we have received in all our institutes, that try as much as possible. So I think that's a great thing, that the loneliness of the patient with the PPE clad doctors and nurses and staff can be severely distressing. So if they're able to communicate somehow with their families and friends outside, it can be very helpful. In addition to that, like you see in this picture, this is normally how we look in routine circumstances. But during COVID time, what we look is something like a space suit astronaut, which gives a very impersonal feeling. They cannot see us smile. They cannot make good eye contact. So all these things can hamper good communication. People have tried to overcome that, and this is one good way, is that putting your pictures with your name on your PPE. So that has been very helpful, especially if you're going to the ward every day. Those people may know, oh, this person I know, so they can become more relaxed and more comfortable with you and come across to you in a more relaxed way. So all these things can, because sometimes, and this is a very important point, in COVID times, we may be the only people who are with the patient when they pass away. Routinely, what happens? Suddenly, they call the family, and most of the family comes from far abroad to be with the patient before they die. And in this case, totally opposite, that even the people who are living together, maybe a husband, wife, or any kind of relationship, they are not able to see after the patient is taken to the COVID ward or ICU, and they may never see them again. So this gives a duty, if we are able there, we are in contact with the patient when the patient passes away, we could either meet or call up the family and tell them that your loved ones were comfortable. This is what they said. They were not alone. This can give a lot of relief to the family. I think I'll just stop here and see if there is any, Dinesh, anything we need to discuss.
There were just more suggestions, like the COVID setting has made things, the non-verbal part of the things have become almost now very difficult. So whatever are left is the words. And also there might be a sense of abandonment both for the family members as well as the patient. That has come up. And the issue which you raised, especially end of life care communication, becomes very, very important. So that has come up.
Yeah. So that is there. A good communicator uses a lot of non-verbal skills, as somebody pointed out, and absolutely that is a big problem. But there are some things which have been said, and you'll realize that there's a lot of smiling we do through our eyes. I mean, unless our eyes also covered sometimes with the PPE, our eyes can show our smile. So if we smile genuinely, our eyes light up. So we can do that. If we talk in a compassionate manner, our happiness or compassion comes through our voice also, which they can hear.
Yeah.
So these are some non-verbal skills which can be used. And as far as possible, we can still try to make some eye contact. The other thing is that sometimes, we in our busy work and busy and stressed out environment, especially in ICUs and all, we can end up saying stuff like, it can be a bit dehumanizing, as we call it, calling the patient by bed number, or COVID positive, or the patient with pneumonia, or the patient on ventilator. Please take this patient for CT scan, the one on the ventilator, this ventilator guy you take there. So that is something we need to avoid, and we try to call them by their names and respect the people for what they are, and not see their social status or the VIP status too much during this time. Few other things are that we should avoid minimizing or comparing their patient's problems. See, everyone is different, and people may take to stress differently. Some people will be more composed, some people will be too panicky. And by saying that, don't get so worried over small things, or something like there are so many people who are facing much bigger problems, is not going to help them at that time. So that is the approach, although again done in good faith, should be avoided. So in addition, in place of that, what we can do is sometimes tell them that accept, or what we say, normalize their emotion, that anyone in your position would perhaps be feeling this way. And considering what you're going through, and they've heard a lot about COVID, anybody would be, it's normal to feel that way. So normalizing them will actually put them at rest. Then again, in anxious people or anxious patients or families, we should avoid that. We do not assume the reason. So we see somebody worried, we say, oh, your patient is okay. See, there's 80% people who don't have any problem on COVID, and we start giving them statistics. It's always a good idea to ask and listen. Again, this goes for any kind of interaction, professional or personal. If you see somebody worried, you ask them and listen to them. Maybe their worry is that there is no food at home. People are quarantined. How will the children get food? Or have I infected anyone else in my family? So once we ask them, we can help them in a better way. And the last do-don'ts is that we should not forget the human touch. By that we mean is that as much as possible, even in, especially if you're wearing a proper PPE, and you might have seen pictures in the newspapers, PPE clad staff is, small girl, they are doing her plait or tying her hair or something, or playing with the children. And there is something which we saw today, is that people are dancing. I'm not sure if that is always the best idea, but what we're saying is physical touch makes a more personal relationship. Of course, we do keep cultural context in mind. In some cultures, male-female touch may be restricted. So with that in mind, it's always good to feel your healthcare worker hold you. And do regular briefing. Information is very important. Most of the calls we get in the hospital are that please find out, maybe our patient is getting treatment, but we don't know what is happening. So regular briefing in whatever way possible, through telephone, WhatsApp, or announcement, or this thing, is very important to do. Okay, I'll again stop here. Anything on the box?
Yes. Some of the things which you discussed, they were also expressed by the participants, especially.
Okay, let's hear them.
Yeah, especially the providing the non-verbal part of the communication. So even with PP, your voice and eyes probably can communicate your compassion.
Mm-hmm.
Then addressing the patients by their name rather than the hospital number or some XYZ thing, that has also come up.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
these are the
So
two
that's
important things that came up during the discussion.
so good to know.
Also, Param,
Yes, Smriti.
when we talk about doing regular briefings, one of the things to remember is that uh, however small, if any symptom control has been achieved, that always to communicate that to the family, because I think we as humans, when there is a gap in the information, we tend to imagine information. We fill that gap with our imagination, which is not always accurate and sometimes more catastrophizing than things really are. So even if a
Mm-hmm.
little bit of relief has been provided to the patient, communicating that to the family really goes a long way in assuaging some of their anxiety.
Yeah, true. Totally,
Yeah,
totally
agreed,
agree.
Smriti. This has been very important because most of the times our communication is okay, everything is fine, oxygen is this much, vitals are okay. But probably they would also like to know whether the individual is comfortable, what is his comfort level. So a word or two about the comfort from our side probably will go a long way in reducing their anxieties and getting them calmed down. Thanks for
Right,
bringing.
Dinesh. Yeah, yeah. That is very important. Thank you, Dinesh and Smriti. Yeah. So moving ahead, uh, uh, we have a new clinical situation now. So we know Ramesh's oxygen was dropping over time, and we were expecting that, but he is still stable. His second son comes from out of town once the lockdown opened, and he had heard somewhere that hospitals are not offering ventilators to older people due to shortage. They are, avoiding giving ventilators to people. Although that is not the reason, as we discussed last 2 days, we didn't feel that it may be doing good for Ramesh. But he has a very well set mind, and he does not accept the discussion that we've had with his brother and the family. And he's very upset, and he really doubts our motives. So that makes him angry, and he wants to have a rediscussion with this. So this is what we call an angry situation, and we need a lot of tact in this. And this is something, as we discussed, a very learnable thing. So naturally, we do know how to feel, but we really don't come through unless in a professional situation, these conflict situation or angry situations, which need a special tackling. And in this case, we are not equals here. We have a patient who's very anxious and angry, and we are the providers. So it's not like fighting between siblings. So we need to go through some specific things, because anger is a very negative and all-consuming emotion. And if not managed in time, it can turn to rage. So rage is a state of anger where our thinking capacity is bypassed, and that is what leads to sometimes very serious consequences like physical violence and breakage of things. And so that is something we need to be very careful about. So what do we do once we see that somebody or a patient or their relative is really upset? Some things we need to do is we just help them, let the anger flow away, let them speak, encourage them to speak, in fact. And even if sometimes there are derogatory comments made by them, it is our magnanimity to let it fly away, let it fly. So we stand and listen if they are standing. We can have a bit of a forward bend and of the spine, respectfully, confidently and calmly. We look into their eyes. And what I always like to say is, good to maintain a bit of a distance that if the situation goes out of control, somebody is not too near to suddenly hit us. And maybe we can have help on standby already. We have informed the security during this kind of conversation. And if they're very angry, one thing which very works very well is that you tell them that there is a option of complaining. That tell me what's wrong with you. We will try to sort it out. If you're still unhappy, there is a channel of complaint. There is a register. There is a complaint box. This sometimes helps a lot, because then you are with them. We are with them. We're telling them that if there is still a problem, you can. And once it is done, we sit down and we try to resolve the situation. calmly and try to correct the correctables. And this is what helps the anger go away. There is no harm in say if something is wrong with the patient, there is no harm in saying sorry or apologizing. I'm not saying that we apologize for the state of situation. There is a way of saying it. What we say is that I really am sorry that your patient is not doing well. I wish I could give you better news. I wish the patient was more stable. Unfortunately, I can see you're upset, frustrated, angry because of this. And we are sorry that the patient is not in a better state than we. So we are also saying sorry, but not taking blame for something which we have not made a mistake. So these are the things which can cool down the patient. So what the 4 C's I already said. So I say during conflict resolution, there's 6 C's. One is that remain calm under all circumstances, especially on our side, and find a commonality. By commonality, we mean that we agree to something that the sun is saying. The sun is saying that ventilators are in shortage and people are not getting ventilators. We agree to that. Yes, you are right. What you heard is that there are a shortage of ventilators because there is a deluge of patients. But this is also true that this is not the reason that we are denying your father. And maybe we can have the same conversation we have with your brother with what we had yesterday. So this is how we find a common ground. But sometimes we can also lose our cool. So as somebody was saying, we need to practice it. So to avoid doing that, it's very important that we care for ourselves. We do our self-care properly. We have a buddy system like in the army where we have a colleague who's working. We tell them that keep a watch on me if I'm feeling too stressed or I'm getting too frustrated. Just let me know so that I can course correct. It's called like a spotter. And also, in addition to that, we practice self-care. That means we have a routine, whatever you like, exercise, meditate, spirituality, any kind of spirituality. We'll be talking about that on Friday under distress, managing distress. So according to our belief system, we keep in touch with our spiritual side, indulge in hobbies. We should learn to disconnect from work once we're out of our shift and stay connected with the friends and family. This will keep us a little more sane. This is the next one, but before that, I would want to ask the co-facilitators anything in the chat box, please.
There are a couple of things.
Yeah, sure.
One is that there's a query like, are there any specific instructions for communication, especially when you are dealing with the patients and families who have been isolated at home? So basically, I think what they are talking about is communication over maybe telephone or that kind of thing. So do we have any specific inputs for that setting?
Okay. So, I mean, I would like to have your views also because there is a difference in different settings, geographical, and how many patients are being admitted depending upon the load in the facilities in the districts or states or countries. And what is happening here with us is that a lot of people are now because the cases are going up, being kept in the house, and those who are home quarantined, there is a team which keeps a tab on them, which calls them and finds them. And some people have oximeters at home and they ask them to check the oxygen levels because, as you know, oxygen drop without symptom is a big problem in COVID times. So yes, so that communication has to be regular on mostly through electronic media, but there are teams which are in the ambulances which go and look at the patient if there is a doubt. Dinesh, Smriti, anything you want to add to that? What is happening here?
Whatever Dr. Param has told, there could be 2 or 3 more issues which will be a bit unique here. So good thing is the sense of isolation with the patient which you see in the hospital setting, that is not there. So that provides you kind of advantage. The problem part is now earlier, at least the family was kind of okay with their safety. So now that anxiety, that worries, and maybe the kind of stigma or other social issues which they might be facing because of the patient being present at home. So those also pertinent issues which we should find a window for discussion during the routine communication. So we do all the things which Dr. Param has told, the medical part of it. But these 2 or 3 issues also we try to tag them, finding a small window of opening during the communication and try to address these issues.
True,
And
true.
also,
Yes,
I think,
Smriti.
I mean, I've mentioned it in the chat box, very often having a person who's unwell at home. And it's not just in times of COVID when there's the added stress of isolating them within the home, but even having an unwell person at home really changes the family dynamics. It changes, the roles within the family. There are added pressures to what the family was anyway going through. And like Dr. Dinesh said, that there's also the added problem of stigma. So while there are all these different, quite complicated and amorphous issues, to ground it in to elicit that and say, what exactly are you struggling with most right now? And the answers could vary. It could be the fact that, I have small children at home and they want to keep going into that room to see the patient. And I'm finding it difficult to stop them from doing it. I'm constantly, being vigilant about the kids not doing that. Or it could be the fact that my neighbors are being really nasty to us. So one of the things is all of these healthy communication techniques that we are talking about right now, it can be also sort of taught to the attender. And, techniques in keeping calm, techniques in maintaining and dealing with the difficult conversation, so on and so forth. Also giving them in their language, in the language that they understand best, the real facts of the status of the illness, right? Like, okay, it's safe for the patient to be doing this. It's okay for this level of interaction to happen, and so on and so forth, so that they are also clear in their minds if they need to communicate to somebody else. So I think constantly doing that is helpful.
True, true, Smriti. Thank you. And one more thing we realized, important, for especially home patient in home care, are that when things were new, when we were asking people to go and quarantine themselves, a few times what happened was that say you have to stay home for 14 days, so please quarantine yourself. We need to tell them the importance of isolation. They went back, they spent few hours collecting stuff from the market, going into the shops and getting the 14 days supplies ready. So this is something, we need to tell them that quarantine means not meeting people. And if you meet 5 people on the way to home, it's likely you might infect them too. So yeah, communication is even more important in people who are isolated at home. Okay, we go on to the last set of the thing is that, so the situation changes now. This Ramesh pneumonia has worsened and he's developed evidence of cytokine storm. He's already has a stroke. There is secondary infection, and this all leads to organ failure setting in. And we are almost sure that he will not make it, and his situation is terminal. So this is the time, again, we need to get all our communication skills in order. What we call is communicating serious illness or breaking bad news, which is commonly known as. So this may be challenging for us, a lot of health workers, especially doctors. We are trained all the time in a training that our purpose in life is saving lives, avoiding death. So we never really think of death as part of the medical treatment. So this is, unless you're exposed to palliative care, this is a thing which is hardly ever discussed. The moment you think the patient is not going to make it, we morally give up. So as doctors or as palliative care or even other clinicians, we all need to learn that if death is inevitable, we need to know how to deal with that. And so this is Spike's protocol developed by MD Anderson Cancer Center in USA, and which is widely used in communicating bad news. So it stands for SPIKES, which is on your screen. So S is obviously setting up the interview, means that there has to be proper place. It has to be uninterrupted. We should not be distracted by our mobile phone, should be off. It should be usually a separate room where we can sit comfortably, position ourselves, maybe near to the patient's family where we need to put our hand on their shoulder or something. After this, we ask the patient's perception or the family perception. It's the same thing, that how ready are they for the news? Are they coming to the room expecting the best, or do they have some idea that their patient is not going to make it? Because in COVID times, people are scared, but still it is so fast that they are mentally not prepared to hear these news. So it's good to know where the patients stand rather than totally shock them out of their wits. The third one is I is for invitation. By invitation, we mean that we need to take permission to disclose. Just don't throw it as a brick. So we asked them that, are you ready for, we need to have a serious talk. When do you want now? After half an hour, you want to call somebody, how much you want to know, who in your family wants to talk. So give them all these options, and then we start giving them the knowledge. And as we already discussed, knowledge has to be clear, non-technical, and slow. Slow means in small chunks. As I said, as the movie clip you saw, that they are so confused that it all goes over their head. So the way to do it is in small chunks. Ask them to, if they've understood, ask them to repeat it. Have they understood what is happening? So this is the way we know that actually the knowledge is reaching them. Then obviously there will be emotional reaction, and we need to show our emotional support and empathy. That is where this will be come in very handy. And then after that, obviously, we need to make a plan whether the patient is to stay there in ICU or go out, or we have anyway decided not to give ventilator. But sometimes, if they are not ready, there is no harm giving them some time that you can go come back, and then we can talk about the plan. Or we go out of the room, you can talk to each other, and we come back and make a plan. So this is very important. There are other issues which are not usually these days relevant to COVID, but sometimes if somebody wants, we discuss is that who to tell the bad news, and we can have a discussion in the discussion time. If we have time there, we can talk about that. We'll come back to that, because there's a lot of discussion and sometimes controversy that should we to be telling everything to the patient or telling to the attendant, and we'll talk about that. So this is just a slide I'm showing is an Indian study, because a lot of people feel that in India, patients are not ready to know their diagnosis or prognosis, which repeatedly now coming up is that it is our culture is changing, and a lot of people in the tune of 90s and 80s really want to know. So the issue here is that things are changing in the society, but what we feel as patient care attendant is that we are strong, but our loved ones may not be able to take it, which may not always be true. So that is where comes patient's autonomy, that before we are in the process of giving bad news or something, if there is somehow, which is more easy in a chronic disease, less easy in COVID, but let's say overall, if we know that beforehand, before this situation arises, that whether the patient would want to know or they want to nominate someone, uh, so that talk to my son, I don't want to know, or just tell me the name of the disease, discuss the plan with that. It is always good and legally correct to have the patient's permission that either they want to know, or if there is someone else they would want you to talk to. Then this is a very very well quoted, and this thing about the stages of grief. Smriti, can I invite you? Smriti has worked on this and does a lot of question answers on this. So could you take us through this curve if you're around? Smriti, are you there?
She's there.
Yes, I'm here.
Yeah.
But Param, before I get into really sort of unpacking this, I know that you also explain it in the context of the COVID crisis, how collectively we're going through these various stages. So would you like to do that first, and then I'll take on the...
Yeah, I think if you can go through stages, then I will put the COVID context that may in the sequence. What do you say? Yeah.
Sure, sure.
So, yeah.
So this is possibly the world's most famous understanding of stages of grief, which was introduced by Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. And she was actually one of the first people to really talk about death and dying and communication skills that can be applied and so on. So the 5 stages that she sort of described were denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance, which you can see on your screens at the moment. But I think the disclaimer that I would like to place is that it's not necessary that it happens in this sort of sequence. So it's not necessary that denial is followed by anger, is followed by bargaining. And quite often people do sort of oscillate between different stages. And there may come a point where it seems like the patient or the family have accepted what is happening, but then go right back to feeling angry. And so that does happen very often. And I think, depending on the circumstances that we're in, depending on various factors, like perhaps how someone in the healthcare system has communicated with us, or there's been some sort of mixed messaging that has come through to them when the messages they received are not consistent with one another, or even the lack of the falling apart of a social support system. All of these things come into play. And I think also it's not necessary that everybody goes through every stage. It's not necessary that someone has to go through depression before reaching a state of acceptance. There are people who skip stages also. And again, that has a lot to do with their own life stories, their own life experiences. And so waiting, for someone to go through a stage may not be, it's not necessary. And we just walk with the patient and the family, irrespective of which stage they're at. And sometimes people get stuck at a particular stage. And that again has a lot to do with what their current circumstances are. It could be the nature of the relationship that they share with the person who is not well. It could be a lot to do with the financial distress that the family might be facing. And whatever stage that they're stuck at, it does make a big difference to get them the kind of external support resources they may need in order to work through that stage and get out of it. So that very quickly, I mean, it's a vast topic, but very quickly that's...
It is a vast topic. Thank you so much, Smriti, for concisely telling it. So yeah, and so as Smriti said in the end, it's very important to be with people going through grief. It's a very fine balance. You don't want to push people. There is a certain time which people need. Everyone takes. What we try to do is we want to snap out of it, and which may not be possible. If our bone breaks, it takes 6-8 weeks to heal. We can't just make the bone fine in a day. Similarly, if there's emotional grief, distress, it will take its time. But if we see that the stages are getting too prolonged or the depression is getting too bad, then sometimes we may need to get external help, as Smriti said, to get them. Dr. Jitin, in this slide, has made very relevant things. For example, in COVID times, like for denial is something which when initially the pandemic came, we said, it will not come into our countries and it is just a localized thing. It won't happen. It can't happen to me. I'm a healthy person. And then when it started hitting close to home, or our friends and family started getting involved, we became angry that who caused this? This is about something which has caused this, and we start the blame game, which is the anger. And bargaining, sometimes, if I don't get the infection, or if I don't lose anybody in this pandemic, I will go and do so and so thing. Or maybe it is it's a punishment for our previous sins. And then, as Smriti said, this is usually the dicey stage of depression, which if it gets too prolonged, and we can lose our hope and our motivation. So we need to move towards acceptance. That is where we accept that something has happened, and we need to take precautions, wear our mask, do whatever we can. The rest is not in our hands. So to end it, and this is the algorithm on page 11, which you have. We've gone through most of the things. Let me see if there is anything we need to say. So yeah, we didn't talk about introducing. So this is a very important part. Whether you're a nurse, doctor, administrator, it's important to introduce. It happens again. We are all well-meaning people. Everybody wants their patient should get well. But sometimes in our routines, and as we said, because of not having been exposed to this knowledge, we don't do that. So how many times I have done it? We walk into the room, are you so-and-so's attendant? His problem is this, we are going to do this test. They don't even know who came and went out of the room. So it's always good to introduce us by name and call the patient by name. Tell your designation. I am the in charge nurse. I am the in charge doctor. I am the consultant in charge. I am the resident in charge. This is actually very, very important to introduce ourselves to the patients. And then ask open-ended questions. Again, you might identify with it. We come and say, you're doing all right? You're fine today? We are already answering. And because of the, doctor-patient power difference, the patient doesn't want to make you upset because you are asking, are you fine? So instead of that, if we use open-ended questions like, how are you feeling today? Patient may come out with the facts more easily. We talked about active listening without being distracted and using non-verbal skills, and then reassuring the patient. Patient perception, we discuss what is it would you like to know. So they may have read something about COVID, they may not know something. So it is good, it will save you time and it will save the patient's time if we ask them that, what do you want to know? Is there anything in the 10 minutes we have? Can I answer your queries rather than give you like a chunk of knowledge? And then use easy language. We already talked about that. And this is something we said that in angry situation, how to anger is that use this, generic looking phrases. I can see, oh yes, it seems very unfair. It is fine to be scared. I can understand. Could you tell me about it? And ask, rather than them shouting, we ask them, could you tell me, you look upset. Can you tell me? When you tell somebody, then they will be more calm. So these are the things you can go into the algorithm. It can be very useful in our practice. With this, we come to the end. You probably have links to this already. Otherwise, you can take a screenshot or picture for further reading if you want of this page and the next page. These are some resource materials, links are already available in, I think, the emails you get, but some may not be there. And we thank everybody from the teams who has been helpful in making this module. And many of them are here today with us too. And at the end, after the discussion, please remember to give your valuable feedback. It will really contribute in understanding what we can improve in our talks. So there are dark clouds in the sky today, but our compassion and good communication can, act like a silver lining. Thank you. I hand over to Dinesh and Smriti for the discussion, and I'm sure there must be more things in the chat.
Thanks, Dr. Param. That's a very crisp presentation on communication. So we do have some time for queries. We can take some queries. So meanwhile, while waiting for some queries, usually there is an argument like in busy setting, can we spend so much time for communication? Is it worth and all? So just to borrow from one of the comments by participants. So by investing minimal amount of time in communication, probably you'll be saving lots of time later in the course of the illness. Because with each and say incomplete communication or poor communication, actually you will be enhancing the negative outcomes later in the course of the disease. So I personally feel this is a very wise investment, whatever time you can invest for communication early in the course of the trajectory of the illness.
Absolutely agree. And there is scientific research to show that if communicated properly in the first go, I will probably show it sometime, that people ended up saving time in consultations, because if you address another 2 minutes extra properly communicating, they will not come back again and again and ask the same question when you're busy with other patients. So it actually initially may be an investment of time, but as somebody's written and you said, Dinesh, it can be actually not that time consuming later once we make it a routine.
Do we have any queries?
So there are different levels of communication training and so on. And so this was quite a specific presentation. And just, just like in any other, upgradation of skills, whether they are surgical skills or diagnostic skills or prognostication skills or whatever, similarly for communication, there are always skills that we can build on. And over time, the deeper you get into it, the easier it gets to incorporate more skills. For instance, a big thing that is emerging is narrative medicine, right? And that is something that worldwide is being recognized as being a very, very effective tool in really not just building rapport with your patients, but also in really understanding how we can help them best. And what narrative medicine really is what we typically do as regular case history taking and stuff like that, just tweaking it a little bit to elicit the person's story, right? So often we find that certain physical symptoms have become difficult to manage, but the cause for it is an underlying anxiety about something else that's going on in their lives. And I know it is not really a doctor or nurse's job to explore, but understanding that there is something behind what they're physically seeing in front of them also goes a long way in honing our more, I think, the more intuitive skills that we might have. So the question that I think Dr. Umar raised about, talking to people while they're at home and things like that, the reassurance that we give would be empty if we did not understand what they were dealing with in their home setting. So, so taking a few minutes to understand what is really, what is the caregiver really struggling with, what is the patient really struggling with, will really give us an insight into how we should tune our communication accordingly. If someone is stressed and crying on the phone, trying to talk to them and expecting them to absorb that information at that time is not going to help. You might have to follow it up with a phone call at a time when they're calmer. So, so things like that. But I'm sure there are many, many experienced practitioners here today. So I might be preaching to the choir, but yeah, that's just something.
Yeah, no, sure. If there's somebody who has a point, this is the time we can unmute you. You please raise your hand and you can even give a verbal response, comment, question, whatever you want.
Yeah, please use the raise hand option and we will unmute you from our side.
Meanwhile, while waiting for their responses, I would like to add that, which was again borrowing from discussion, learning is one thing and practicing is the other thing. So now that you have now become aware about some important tools in communication, maybe you were aware earlier also. So good thing will be like you try some of these things one at a time based on your comfort and your timelines, and get used to it. So these frameworks, which appear to be very rigid frameworks, and when initially you look at it, they might seem like out of the world for you. But gradually, once you start practicing, you'll find that these are the things which you usually do, but put in more formalized ways. So that is what I would like to suggest, that try to practice some of the skills which we have learned. And of course, as Smriti told, you can always look for other sources also to improve the communication.
I think Shala wanted to say something.
Yeah. Yes, Shala. Yes, please go ahead. You are unmuted now. She got muted again.
Shala ma'am, did you want to say something, or was that an accidental hand raise? Supriya, would you like to add? I'll just stop.
So the parent ego state is all about things you have learned from authority figures. So that's why it's called the.
Am I audible?
Now, if you zoom into the parent ego state, we saw something
Hello.
called structural diagram.
Yes, you are.
Yeah.
But there's some background noise coming, Supriya.
Circles, one on top.
Yeah, just a second. Actually, just the next level of my course has started at 4 o'clock. So I was just about to log out. Okay. Actually, I'm not very, I'm a emotional coach and I'm a counselor and I work with various modalities. So what you were saying, I really enjoyed the whole stuff. And I'll communicate maybe later with you in terms of what I see. And if you find it, I won't say if you find it good enough, because I know it's good enough.
I would love to do a small workshop if it is possible. I'm extremely sorry. I have to just log out. My next, yeah, I'll communicate later. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
There's an interesting comment from Dr. Uma. She talks about role of non-medical person in the communication. So Dr. Uma, that is very, very important because the communication is not just individual effort. Like most other things in the palliative care, communication is also a team effort. So like you communicate in certain way, and once you walk out of the situation, someone communicating in all the totally different tone and totally different sense, it doesn't work that way. So of course, all the team members, irrespective of their medical qualification, they need to be trained in communication. And I would go to the extent of saying that, in fact, the so-called non-technically qualified person, they might end up being better communicators because probably they will respect this kind of skills far more than their technical skills. So Smriti might add on that.
Dinesh sir?
Yeah.
Actually, Dr. Sandeep Kumar want to say something. He's
Yeah.
raised his hand.
Okay. I think he's unmuted. Dr. Sandeep, sir, can you?
Yeah. Thanks, Dr. Dinesh. Like in my what I feel about communication more, unless we get into the shoes of others, you really cannot get to their levels and communicate. It doesn't matter whether medical person, non-medical person, we have to become empathetic first. We need to feel from their side of view. I can say, okay, I'm speaking softly, no, but how my perception and body language is being portrayed to the person across me, and what it's my experience in last 2 and 3 months dealing with COVID in our own medical fraternity. It's not about doctors. Obviously, nurses are the forefront, taking burnt of everything, but as a physician herself, just staying away and remotely, just on telephonic, not even seeing a patient. Unless we follow and practice, we need to lead from the front before we make a difference in society. Unless the physician himself is a leader, leading from front, get into the shoes of the patient and the relatives and the friends, then we can be a more empathetic and sympathetic and be more better communicative to the patient and resolve more than 80% of things apart from other things. That's all I just wanted to add in this.
Very well said, Dr. Sandeep. In fact, I know that at a time like this, when there is such a deluge of patients and there's so much grief and trauma, and let's not forget that it's very traumatizing for the healthcare providers as well. And we heard from many colleagues in Italy and stuff when they were at the height of it, that some of their secondary trauma was coming from the fact that they were finding themselves helpless, not being able to find the right words to communicate, and that was also causing them immense amounts of stress. So I completely, I love that you mentioned that empathy. And I feel like there's another phrase that I came across some time back, which is rational compassion. Because losing ourselves in the worldview of the patient sometimes might impair our own, professional judgment. So it's great. It's important to be empathetic. It's important to hold on to our rational compassion and competence. And at a time when there's so much pressure on the healthcare system, I think it's also important to practice that compassion towards our own team members and ourselves. And I think an important part of communication is communication within teams. When there has been a particularly distressing death or illness trajectory, to identify in the team who it's affected and impacted, to have that little bit of a debrief within your own team members is also a very important communication skill. So it's not just from the healthcare system towards the families, but it's also intra-system that is important, I think.
Absolutely, yes, Smriti. That part we haven't dealt, but like a morning meeting or starting of the shift meeting or debrief, as you said, is very important. In fact, it shares your emotional stress also and making a plan, because as Dr. Sandeep and everybody's mentioned, that these are times which we are not used to as healthcare workers. We say more people than they die, but working with COVID, especially where there's a lot of mortality, we can get unnerved. There's another good comment from Dr. Vivian in the chat box saying a similar thing about practicing, is very important. Yes, of course it is. I mean, I can say from experience, a few years I've been doing all these courses, and sometimes in a very busy OPD, so you tend to lose your cool sometimes. You can't work. So let's not be very hard on ourselves. We should try to practice as much as possible. Sometimes you really may not have time, but our experience is that mostly it's not because of time, mostly because we ignore using our communication skills. So as you said, honesty and empathy is very important. If you genuinely care for the patients, it will make us, more amenable to learning and incorporating these skills into our practice. All right. I think if there is no more queries, hand over to you people for the feedback session. Smriti, anything else? Dinesh? Nothing?
No, Dr. Param. I think we are done now for the day.
Yeah.
There are a few people whose names have not been displayed and who have not entered their names in the chat box. Please take the time to do it, because this will impact the certification at the end. If we don't know your names, we don't know how to certify you. So please do take the time to look into it. And if you have some trouble with it, mention it in the WhatsApp group that you have with tips, or also just reach out to us. So with that, we come to the close of this session. Thank you all so much for some excellent inputs. We've learned from you as much as we hope we've shared. And tomorrow's session is a very important one on end-of-life care and bereavement. And we hope that you will go through the resource toolkit before coming so that we can have a richer discussion. And thank you all again for taking this time. I'm sure it's a very busy time for all of you in the middle of the afternoon, but thank you for being with us. And do fill in the poll as that appears at the end of the session before you check out. Thanks, and see you tomorrow.